On March 14, 2023, at 3:42 in the afternoon, Tyler Brennan, a technical diving instructor working 78 miles west of Key West, Florida, captured 8 minutes and 34 seconds of footage that should not exist. At 1,240 feet below the surface, where water pressure exceeds 550 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a human skull in seconds, his helmet camera recorded something moving through the darkness with impossible ease. Not a fish, not a shark, not any known deep-sea creature. What Tyler filmed had a face, a completely, unmistakably human face, and it was looking directly into his camera. Tyler Brennan was 38 years old at the time, a father to an 8-year-old daughter named Emma, and one of fewer than 2,000 certified trimix divers in the United States. He'd earned his technical diving instructor certification in 2009 after 6 years as a Navy diver, and his logbook showed over 1,200 dives in conditions most recreational divers would consider suicidal. He wasn't reckless. He was methodical. Friends described him as cautious to a fault, the kind of diver who triple-checked every gauge, every connection, every backup system before descending past 400 feet. He volunteered with marine conservation groups on weekends, teaching kids about reef ecosystems. He drove a 10-year-old pickup truck and lived in a modest rental house in Marathon, Florida. Nothing about Tyler suggested someone prone to hallucination, exaggeration, or attention-seeking behavior. He was, by every professional standard, exactly the kind of witness whose testimony you'd trust with your life. The mission that took Tyler to 1,240 feet that afternoon was straightforward, at least on paper. A private aircraft, a Cessna citation registered to Marcus Delacroix, a tech industry entrepreneur from Miami, worth an estimated $4.7 million, had gone down in the Gulf of Mexico 11 days earlier. The National Transportation Safety Board had contracted a marine salvage company to recover the black box, and that company had hired Tyler for his deep diving expertise. The aircraft had been located via emergency locator transmitter at coordinates that put it in what commercial divers call technical depth, beyond the 220 feet, where recreational diving equipment becomes dangerously inadequate. Tyler would be using a closed-circuit rebreather, a sophisticated system that recycles exhaled breath, scrubs out carbon dioxide, and adds back oxygen. His gas mix was Trimix 1070, 10% oxygen, 70% helium, 20% nitrogen, specifically calculated to prevent both oxygen toxicity and nitrogen narcosis at extreme depth. He carried dual dive computers, redundant buoyancy systems, and enough emergency gas to handle multiple equipment failures. The descent plan called for 18 minutes of bottom time and 4 hours and 20 minutes of staged decompression on the way back up. The conditions that afternoon were nearly perfect. Surface temperature was 73 degrees Fahrenheit, air temperature 81, wind at 7 knots from the southeast, seas running 2 to 3 feet. Visibility at the surface was excellent, over 60 feet horizontally. Tyler entered the water at 2:57 p.m. from the dive platform of the salvage vessel Gulf Prowler, a 60-foot converted shrimp boat operated by a captain named Vince Cardoza, who'd been running commercial diving operations for 30 years. Vince watched Tyler's descent on the sonar display, tracking the slow, controlled drop through layers of thermocline where temperature shifted from warm surface water to the perpetual cold of the deep Gulf. At 500 feet, Tyler paused for a 2-minute safety check. At 800 feet, another pause. At 1,000 feet, he switched on his primary helmet lights. The wreckage should have been another 240 feet down. Tyler reached the debris field at 3:38 p.m. His helmet camera, a high-definition unit rated for depths up to 1,500 feet, automatically activated when he switched to external lights. The Cessna had hit hard. The fuselage was split into 3 main sections scattered across approximately 80 feet of seafloor. Tyler began a systematic search pattern, sweeping his lights left to right, documenting everything. He found the cockpit section first, nose crumpled, windshield shattered, instrument panel dark. The black box would be in the tail section. He turned to begin swimming toward what remained of the rear fuselage when his light caught something at the edge of its beam. Movement. Not the slow, drifting movement of debris or marine life, but something quick and deliberate. Something that moved and then stopped, as if it had noticed his light, as if it was watching him. Tyler adjusted his camera angle, zoomed the lens, and pushed deeper into the darkness beyond the wreckage. That's when he saw it. 40 feet away, partially obscured by suspended sediment and the absolute blackness of deep water, something was there. Something that shouldn't be possible. And it was coming closer. Tyler's first thought was another diver. Someone else contracted for the recovery. Maybe a backup team he hadn't been briefed about. It happened sometimes on high-value salvage operations, redundancy built into the plan without full communication between teams. He adjusted his helmet lights to low beam, standard protocol when you spot another diver at depth to avoid blinding them, and raised his right hand in the universal diver's greeting, a simple wave. The figure didn't wave back. It just kept coming, moving through the water with a fluid grace that seemed wrong somehow, too smooth, too effortless for someone wearing the bulk of technical diving gear. Tyler checked his dive computer. 1,247 feet. Water temperature 39 degrees Fahrenheit. 18 minutes into his bottom time. Everything normal except for the shape coming toward him out of the darkness, now maybe 30 feet away, close enough that his lights should be illuminating equipment, tanks, the bright colors of a dry suit. But he saw none of that. What he saw instead made him stop breathing for 3 full seconds, long enough for his rebreather to trigger a warning chirp in his ear. The figure wasn't wearing any equipment at all. No tanks, no mask, no suit, nothing. It was completely, impossibly naked. Tyler's training kicked in before his mind could fully process what he was seeing. Check your gas mix, check your narcosis level, verify your depth reading, rule out hallucination. He glanced at his wrist-mounted backup computer. Same reading. 1,247 feet. Helium percentage correct. Oxygen partial pressure 0.85. Exactly where it should be. No narcosis. No equipment malfunction. He looked back at the figure, now 20 feet away and slowing, as if aware it was being observed. It was humanoid, that much was clear. Roughly 5.5 feet tall, slender build, long hair floating around its head in the current. Skin pale, almost translucent in his lights. Arms, legs, hands, feet, all proportioned exactly like a human being. But it was the face that made Tyler's heart rate spike hard enough for his dive computer to log it. The face was human. Not fish-like, not adapted, not alien. Human. A woman's face. High cheekbones, narrow nose, full lips, eyes that caught his light and reflected it back with a strange amber quality. She was looking directly at him, directly at his camera. And she was breathing. Not with gills, not with any visible apparatus. Just breathing, as naturally as if she were standing on dry land. Tyler had logged over 1,200 dives in 15 years. He'd seen things that defied easy explanation, bioluminescent phenomena that looked like UFOs, deep-sea creatures so bizarre they seemed designed by fever dreams, shadows and shapes that played tricks on your mind when you were narked and exhausted. But this wasn't a trick. This wasn't narcosis. His camera was recording everything in 4,000-line resolution, timestamp overlaid in the corner, depth and temperature data streaming across the bottom of the frame. Whatever this was, it was real. It was there, and it was studying him with an expression he could only describe as curious. Not aggressive, not frightened, just curious. She tilted her head slightly, the way someone might when examining an interesting specimen, and then she did something that made Tyler forget every protocol he'd ever learned. She smiled. It wasn't a human smile exactly. The muscles moved correctly, the lips curved, the expression registered as friendly. But there was something else underneath it, something ancient and patient and utterly beyond his understanding. Tyler felt a sensation he'd never experienced at depth before. Not fear, not exactly. Something more primal than that. The recognition that he was in the presence of something that had been here long before humans learned to build boats, long before humans learned to dive, possibly long before humans existed at all. He forced himself to move, to do something, anything other than float there staring. He raised his hand again, this time making the sign for OK, thumb and forefinger forming a circle, the other three fingers extended. Standard diver communication. Are you okay? It was absurd to gesture to something that clearly didn't need to be okay, that was somehow thriving at a depth that would kill an unprotected human in seconds. But it was all he could think to do. The woman, the creature, whatever she was, watched his hand. Then, with deliberate slowness, she raised her own hand and copied the gesture exactly. Thumb and forefinger in a circle. 3 fingers extended. She held it for a moment, then lowered her hand and made a different gesture. She brought both hands up in front of her chest and began moving her fingers in a complex pattern, tracing geometric shapes in the water. Triangle, square, pentagon, hexagon. Each shape perfect, each movement precise. Then she stopped and looked at him, waiting. Tyler realized with a shock that cut through the cold and the pressure and the absolute strangeness of the moment. She was trying to communicate. She was showing him something, and she wanted him to understand. He glanced at his dive computer again. 1,247 feet. 23 minutes of bottom time. He was running out of margin, but he couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until he understood what she was trying to tell him. Tyler watched the woman for 47 seconds. He knew the exact duration because his helmet camera stamped every frame with elapsed time. And later, when he reviewed the footage during his decompression stops, he would count every single second of that sustained eye contact. She held his gaze without blinking, without moving, perfectly still in the water column at 1,247 feet, as if gravity and pressure and cold meant nothing to her. Then, without warning, she turned away and swam back into the darkness beyond his lights. Not frantically, not fleeing, just leaving, with the same fluid grace she'd arrived with. Tyler tried to follow her with his camera, panning left, but she disappeared within seconds, swallowed by the absolute blackness of the deep gulf. He stayed there for another 90 seconds, lights pointed into the void, waiting for her to return or for something else to emerge. Nothing did. He checked his computer. 26 minutes of bottom time. He'd exceeded his planned 18-minute limit by 8 minutes, which meant his decompression obligation had just increased significantly. He needed to start ascending immediately. He took one last look at the darkness, marked the GPS coordinates on his backup computer, and began the long, slow journey back to the surface. The ascent was torture. Not physically, his body handled the decompression stops without issue, but mentally. Every 3 minutes at designated depths, mandatory safety stops to allow nitrogen to off-gas from his tissues, and during every stop, Tyler pulled out his wrist-mounted backup display and reviewed the footage his helmet camera had captured. The video was clear, startlingly clear. 8 minutes and 34 seconds of continuous recording showing the woman approaching, making the OK gesture, tracing the geometric patterns with her fingers, staring into the camera. At the 600-foot stop, Tyler made a decision that probably saved his life later. He activated the wireless transfer function on his helmet camera and copied the entire 8-minute 34-second file to his dive computer's internal memory. Then, during the 400-foot stop, he transferred it again from his dive computer to his personal phone, sealed in a waterproof case attached to his equipment harness. 2 backups, 3 copies total. He didn't know why he felt the need to do this. Some instinct, some voice in the back of his mind that whispered this footage was important, that someone might not want it to exist, that he needed to protect it. By the time he reached his final decompression stop at 20 feet, watching the sun set through the water above him, he'd reviewed the footage 6 times. And each time he noticed something new. Something he'd missed during the actual encounter, because his mind had been overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of what he was seeing. At 8:17 that evening, 4 hours and 20 minutes after he'd left the surface, Tyler broke through into air. Captain Vince Cardoza was waiting at the dive platform, along with 2 crew members who helped Tyler climb aboard and remove his rebreather harness. Tyler pulled off his hood and mask, breathing real air for the first time in over 5 hours, and the first words out of his mouth were not about the black box or the wreckage or the mission at all. He looked at Vince and said, "I need to show you something. Right now, before we do anything else." Vince was 52 years old, a third-generation commercial diver who'd seen enough strange things in 30 years at sea that very little surprised him anymore. But when Tyler played the helmet camera footage on the deck of the Gulf Prowler, when he showed Vince the woman swimming at 1,247 feet with no equipment, making geometric patterns with her hands, staring into the camera with those amber eyes, Vince's face went white. Not pale. White. He watched the entire 8 minutes and 34 seconds without saying a word. And when it finished, he looked at Tyler and said, "We're going back to port. Right now. And you don't show this to anyone else until we figure out what to do." Tyler nodded. He was exhausted, dehydrated, cold to his core despite the thermal protection of his dry suit. But he knew Vince was right. This wasn't something you just posted online or sent to the local news. This was something else, something that required careful thought. The Gulf Prowler was 40 nautical miles from Key West when the Coast Guard intercepted them. It was 9:53 at night, almost dark, running lights on, autopilot engaged for the 2-hour transit back to port. Tyler was below deck reviewing the footage for the 8th time on his phone when he heard the engines throttle back suddenly, and Vince's voice over the intercom saying, "Tyler, you need to come up here." He climbed the ladder to the wheelhouse and saw the lights. Not one boat. 3 Coast Guard vessels in formation, surrounding them, and overhead the unmistakable thump, thump, thump of a helicopter. A big one, not Coast Guard colors. It circled once, then descended toward the Gulf Prowler's deck, forcing Vince to shut down the engines completely. The helicopter landed, which should have been impossible on a deck that size, but the pilot made it look easy. The side door opened and 6 people climbed out. 5 wore tactical gear with "No AA" stenciled across their backs. The 6th wore a suit. He walked directly to the wheelhouse, climbed the stairs, and pulled out a badge. FBI. The name on the badge said Harmon. No first name. Just Harmon. He looked at Tyler and said, "I understand you recovered some unusual footage today. We're going to need all of your equipment. Cameras, computers, phones, GPS units, everything. This is now a federal investigation." Agent Harmon's technical team confiscated Tyler's helmet camera, his primary and backup dive computers, his GPS unit, and his phone. They were professional, methodical, almost polite about it. They filled out forms, gave him receipts, told him the equipment would be returned after analysis was complete. The official explanation came from Harmon himself, delivered in the wheelhouse of the Gulf Prowler, while 3 Coast Guard vessels maintained position around them. What you encountered was a bioluminescent phenomenon, likely a school of deep-sea jellyfish or squid reacting to your lights. At extreme depth, with nitrogen narcosis affecting cognitive function, it's common for divers to misinterpret what they're seeing. We've had 6 similar reports in this region over the past 18 months. All followed the same pattern. All were later determined to be natural marine life. Tyler didn't argue. He nodded, accepted the explanation, signed the forms. But inside his dry suit, tucked into a sealed pocket against his chest, his personal phone was still there. The phone Harmon's team had confiscated was a decoy, an older model Tyler kept for emergencies. The phone with the backup footage was safe. When the helicopter finally lifted off at 10:38 that night and the Coast Guard vessels dispersed, Vince started the engines and continued toward Key West, without a word. He didn't ask Tyler if he'd held anything back. He didn't need to. 30 years at sea had taught Vince when to talk and when to stay silent. Tyler didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table in his rental house in Marathon, Emma asleep in her bedroom down the hall, laptop open, backup phone connected, and began analyzing the footage frame by frame. He'd watched it 8 times during the decompression stops, but always on the small screen of his dive computer or phone, always with tired eyes and an exhausted brain. Now, on a 17-inch display at full resolution, he could see details he'd missed entirely. At timestamp 4 minutes and 12 seconds, just as the woman turned to swim away, there was a reflection. Tyler had to zoom in to 200% magnification to catch it, but once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. In the woman's eyes, reflecting his helmet lights, there was movement behind him. Not debris, not fish, humanoid shapes. At least 3 of them, possibly 4, maintaining position in the darkness beyond the reach of his lights. They'd been there the entire time, watching him while he watched her. Tyler felt his skin prickle despite the warmth of his house. He'd been surrounded. The woman hadn't been alone. She'd been the ambassador, the one sent forward to make contact while the others observed from a safe distance. He spent the next 2 hours searching online for any similar reports. Deep-sea humanoids, underwater encounters, unexplained diving incidents in the Gulf of Mexico. Most of what he found was conspiracy theory garbage, blurry photos, obvious hoaxes, people claiming to have seen mermaids or Atlantis or aliens. But buried deep in an obscure marine biology forum posted in 1997 and never replied to, he found something real. A detailed account from someone using the screen name Cassidy MB, describing an encounter at 980 feet off the coast of Key West in June of 1987. The post included technical details that only a real diver would know. Gas mixes, decompression schedules, equipment specifications, and a description that matched Tyler's experience almost exactly. Humanoid figure, female appearance, no equipment, swimming naturally at depth where humans cannot survive. Made geometric patterns with hands, appeared to be attempting communication. Reported to NOAA and Coast Guard. Career destroyed as result. Do not recommend following official channels. The post included an email address. Tyler checked the timestamp. 2:37 in the morning. Too late to call anyone, but email could wait. He typed out a message explaining who he was, what he'd seen, asked if Cassidy MB was still monitoring the account. He hit send and went to check on Emma, found her sleeping peacefully, then returned to his kitchen and stared at the frozen frame on his laptop screen. The woman's face, captured in perfect clarity, looking into his camera. Looking at him. The reply came at 6:15 the next morning. This is Dr. Helen Cassidy, retired marine biologist. If you're the diver from yesterday's encounter, we need to talk immediately. Do not discuss this over email. Call me. A phone number followed. Tyler made coffee, waited until 7 out of courtesy, then dialed. The woman who answered sounded old but sharp, voice steady despite her age. She was 71 now, she said, living in a small town in northern Georgia, far from the ocean. Yes, she'd encountered them in 1987 while conducting deep-sea coral research off Key West. Yes, her career had been destroyed when she filed an official report. The university terminated her research funding within a month. NOAA blacklisted her from federal grants. Colleagues stopped returning calls. Within a year, she was teaching high school biology in Atlanta. But here's what you need to understand, she said, and Tyler heard her voice drop lower, more serious. They've been there for decades, maybe longer. The Navy knows. NOAA knows. There's a reason they restrict those depths, and it's not to protect coral. The geometric patterns she made with her hands, did you capture that on camera? Tyler confirmed he had. Those are identical to what I saw in '87. Exactly identical. Triangle, square, pentagon, hexagon. In that exact sequence. They're not just trying to communicate. They're showing us something specific, something mathematical, something that proves they're intelligent. 4 days later, Tyler received a package at his house. No return address. Postmark from Washington, D.C., dated 2 days prior. Inside was a manila envelope containing 83 pages of photocopied documents. Navy sonar scans from 1994 through 2023 showing massive geometric structures on the Gulf floor at depths exceeding 1,800 feet. Internal memoranda with classified stamped across the top, describing a stable population estimated at 200 to 300 individuals living in artificial habitats of unknown origin and composition. A protocol document dated March 1996 establishing non-contact guidelines, following what was described only as the incident, and a map. A detailed bathymetric map of the Gulf of Mexico with 17 locations marked in red ink, coordinates listed, depths noted. The location where Tyler had encountered the woman was marked. So was Dr. Cassidy's 1987 dive site. So were 15 other locations spread across the Gulf, all in deep water, all restricted to civilian diving. At the bottom of the last page, handwritten in blue pen, was a single sentence. They have been monitoring this population since World War II. You were allowed to see them. Ask yourself why. The consequences started small. 10 days after the encounter, Tyler received an email from the salvage company terminating his contract for reasons not specified. No explanation, no warning. Just immediate termination of a relationship that had lasted 4 years and included over 60 successful recovery operations. His bank called the next morning. His checking account had been flagged for suspicious activity and temporarily frozen pending investigation. When Tyler asked what suspicious activity, the bank representative couldn't or wouldn't say, just that it was under federal review and would be resolved in due course. 2 days after that, Agent Harmon showed up at Tyler's house unannounced. He didn't come with a team this time. He came alone, in an unmarked sedan, wearing casual clothes instead of a suit. He sat at Tyler's kitchen table, the same table where Tyler had spent hours analyzing the footage, and made an offer. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is looking for experienced technical divers to consult on deep-water research projects. The pay is substantial, $75,000 annually, plus full benefits, for approximately 10 to 15 days of work per year. All you have to do is sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding anything you encounter during these projects. And stop talking publicly about what you saw on March 14th. Tyler asked what would happen if he didn't accept the offer. Harmon smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone delivering a message they'd delivered many times before. Then your life gets progressively more complicated. Contract work dries up. Banks find problems with your accounts. The IRS develops a sudden interest in your tax returns. Your daughter's school receives anonymous complaints about your fitness as a parent. None of it provable. None of it traceable. But all of it very, very real. Tyler didn't sign. He couldn't explain exactly why. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was principle. Maybe it was the memory of Dr. Cassidy's voice on the phone, telling him how they'd destroyed her career for telling the truth. He told Harmon he needed time to think about it, and Harmon left without pushing, which somehow made it worse. The offer wasn't going away. The pressure would just increase until Tyler either accepted or broke. But something happened in the weeks that followed that changed Tyler's perspective entirely. He started receiving messages, anonymous messages through encrypted email services, through burner phones, through accounts created specifically to contact him and then deleted immediately afterward. The first came from someone identifying himself only as former Navy saturation diver, retired 2008. The message was brief. During service in Gulf of Mexico, 1999 through 2003, we received briefings about residents of deep Gulf zones. Protocol was observe, do not engage, never surface report. They told us it was classified research subjects. They told us any breach of protocol would result in court-martial. 3 divers in my unit saw them. All of us stayed silent for 20 years. You're not crazy. They're real. 2 more messages followed over the next week. Both from retired military divers. Both describing similar briefings. Both confirming encounters at depths between 800 and 1,200 feet. Both saying the same thing. The government knew. The military knew. And the official policy was silence. The leaked documents Tyler had received in the mail became suddenly more significant. He read them again, carefully this time, paying attention to dates and department names and authorization signatures. The Joint Task Force had been established in 1998, according to a memorandum marked Top Secret and signed by someone whose name had been redacted. The stated purpose was long-term monitoring and non-interference protocol regarding deep-dwelling humanoid population in Gulf of Mexico territorial waters. Population, not phenomenon, not anomaly, population. The document outlined observation guidelines, restricted zones, protocols for accidental contact by civilian divers. It referenced an earlier incident from 1996 that had necessitated the creation of formal protocols, but details of that incident were completely blacked out. 27 years of official policy. 27 years of knowing something was down there. 27 years of keeping it secret. Tyler called Dr. Cassidy again and read her the documents over the phone. She listened in silence until he finished, then said something that Tyler couldn't stop thinking about afterward. In 1987, when I encountered one of them, she ignored me completely. Swam past me like I wasn't there. Didn't make eye contact. Didn't try to communicate. I was just an obstacle in her path. But in 2023, she looked directly at your camera. She made those geometric patterns deliberately, knowing you were recording. Tyler, they've changed their behavior. They're not hiding anymore. The question you should be asking isn't why the government wants to keep them secret. The question is why, after decades of avoiding contact, they suddenly want to be seen. As of November 2024, the area where Tyler encountered the woman has been officially classified as a marine protected area under federal jurisdiction. The public explanation cites sensitive deep-sea coral ecosystems requiring preservation. Recreational and commercial diving below 400 feet is permanently prohibited within a 15 nautical mile radius. NOAA maintains a monitoring station on a permanent buoy at the site. Coast Guard vessels patrol regularly. The official position remains unchanged. There is nothing unusual in those waters, just coral and marine life requiring protection. Tyler still has the backup footage. He's never posted it online. He's never sent it to media outlets or conspiracy theory websites. He keeps it on an encrypted drive, hidden, waiting for the right moment or the right person, or the right reason to reveal it. Maybe that moment will come. Maybe it won't. But 3 months after Agent Harmon confiscated his equipment, Tyler received a package. Inside was his dive computer, the one his helmet camera had been attached to, the one that logged every detail of his dive on March 14th. He powered it on and checked the depth log. Maximum depth recorded, 1,247 feet. Time and date matched his dive exactly. But there was a second entry in the log, a dive recorded while the computer was supposedly in federal custody. Maximum depth, 1,873 feet. Timestamp, March 16, 2023. 2 days after Tyler's encounter, someone had taken his computer back down to those coordinates, and they'd gone 626 feet deeper. Into water where the pressure exceeds 800 pounds per square inch. Into water where no human should be able to survive. The log showed 42 minutes of bottom time at that depth. Then a controlled ascent. Then nothing. Tyler stared at that entry for a long time, trying to understand what it meant. Someone went back. Someone went deeper. And whatever they found down there at 1,873 feet, they came back up. The question that keeps Tyler awake at night isn't what they found. It's what found them.